What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. And I did recently pick up a few Han Solos for my collection that I wanted to show you guys and give you a little background detail on them. And I love Han Solo, but I just didn't have that many of them in my collection going into the year. And that was kind of one of my goals, was to pick up a few more loose graded Han Solos. And I did. I picked over the last couple months, I've picked up two really beautiful Spanish figures, as well as a Baggie that I wanted to show you guys. And we're going to start off with a Han Hoth that I recently picked up. And I didn't have any loose graded Han Hoths yet. And I think, in my opinion, I picked up one of the more desirable ones to go with the three that were already in my collection. And these are all third generation Han Hoth Polish bootlegs. These were made in Poland in the 1990s, third generation. There are some first and second generation examples that are much more desirable, but at least for right now, these are the only ones in my collection. And I've got a more standard color scheme Han Hoths. These are kind of more in keeping with the licensed figures. This one has darker brown boots. This one's got lighter brown boots. The darker brown boots example's got an 80 plus with CAS, and this one's an 85 grade. And this is a very common one as well. It's kind of a lighter blue, baby blue example that has silver goggles. You can find these pretty easily, and this one's graded 90. So these are the only loose graded Han Hoths in my collection, and they're all bootlegs. So recently I was very fortunate enough to pick up in an eBay auction this. This is a Spanish Poch, early Spanish figure with the very well-known chocolate. It's called the chocolate legs variation. And I've got some information from Javier Ruy Lopez's book on the Made in Spain figures, but I just wanted to at least show you this example first before we kind of dig into the book. But these are a very dark brown chocolate legs, and UKG even notes that on the label. So let me show you the label first. But it says made in Hong Kong, Poch chocolate legs Han Solo. It really should say Han Solo Hoth, but this one is graded 80% overall. The figure got an 85, and the paint got an 80. There was some very light paint wear to the figure, and let's see if we can do a nice zoom in here. So as you can see on the foot there, there's a little bit of a paint defect there, and then on his hand, there's also from where the weapon was probably in his hand. That had some paint wear, but overall, a very, very clean example. Early Spanish figures imported parts from the Hong Kong factories and then assembled and painted them in Spain. So they're very well known to have poor paint applications, very poor sonic welding. They can fall apart in your hand, but this one is a very, very clean example. And I just thought it was worth making a go for it on eBay, and I was very fortunate enough to pick it up. But very, very dark brown, milky kind of chocolate brown legs. You can see another paint defect down there, but really, really nice example. And finally was able to pick up another Spanish figure and my first licensed Han Hoth as part of the collection. So I think before we dig into the other Hans I picked up, I thought I'd show you really quickly the guidebook. And for those of you who have not seen the book before, this is called Made in Spain Comprehensive Catalog PBP Pock. And so the Pock example that I just showed you is the earlier example before the Pock factory merged with PBP and they started producing and painting and assembling their own figures in Spain. But the early Pock figures, that's why they have Hong Kong COOs, is because they imported the parts and then assembled them there. So in the book, for every figure, he does a comparison of the Spanish figure versus the standard licensed Hong Kong. And you can just see the color difference there for these chocolate legs Han Hoths, and that is how it's labeled in the book. It's the chocolate color pants, made in Hong Kong COO. So the Hong Kong COO for the Poch figures is a 5-line. So it's got the copyright, the 1980, and the LFL, and then on the other leg it says made in Hong Kong. And for this example in the book, you can see the bubbling of the paint. And that's a very common defect for the Spanish figures across all characters, is that the paint kind of bubbles and it doesn't tend to stay on very well. It's just because of the type of paint they use. It's a poor quality paint. The other thing I'll note for this figure is that there is a variation for the blaster that was made specifically in the Spanish factory. And so they can come with either the standard Hong Kong blaster, which is the one what mine comes with. But there is another one that has a very small kind of piece right there on the barrel. Hopefully that's coming through okay, but you can see that little kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, but a little plastic piece that extends off of the barrel versus this one from the Hong Kong factories that does not have that little spur there. So, and you can tell it's also a slightly different color. It's a little bit rougher texture because, again, it was just not quite as nicely assembled as the Hong Kong factory examples. But you know, most of these Poch figures can be paired with certain Hong Kong accessories. But for this DL44 blaster, there was one that was Spain specific. Mine is not that, though. Mine is just the standard kind of Hong Kong blaster, as you can see there. It doesn't have that little spur on the barrel, but I did want to at least note that. But the important thing with these Spanish figures is just to verify it that that it's the correct figure. There's really good guides online. If you don't have this book by Javier Ruy Lopez, you can check out Variant Villain on the web. They have lots of really great high-res photos of the different COOs for the date stamps for all the Spanish figures, whether they're PBP or the made in Hong Kong Pocs. But it's just a nice way to show you how different the pant color is for that chocolate legs Han Hoth versus the standard Hong Kong. There are clearly other color variations for the Hong Kong Han Hoth as well. There's like the letter tans like you see here. There's also a molded pants that's actually molded in brown plastic. There's a darker brown Hong Kong that is not the Poch. So it's very tricky to kind of figure out whether you've got the chocolate legs or not. But this one is the 5-line COO there, as you can see very clearly. So the book goes into lots of good detail on what card backs they came in. So this variation is confirmed on the early PBP Poch 37 back card with the Imperio Contrataka card back. So and that's the Poch logo there. So just some really interesting information, but I thought I would at least show you what's in the book. And one more close-up of this chocolate legs Han Hoth Poch before we dig into the other ones. But just a gorgeous example. I think it was either Muffin Man or Character Building. I think it was Character Building on eBay that had this one at auction, and it arrived safe and sound with a great packing job. So very, very happy with that. But I've got one more Spanish Poch I'm going to show you, as well as a Baggie Han Solo. So stay tuned as I pull that one out next. I also picked up 2 more Han Solos for my loose graded collection. I don't have a big Han Solo collection, but I do have some nice examples. I've got a couple of Polish bootlegs, including this one with the gray shirt that was actually a book photo sample from the Polish bootleg Guidebook by Jacob Brzezinski. And it's a really great guidebook, and I was lucky enough to purchase from him one of the figures used in the book, so I had it displayed by CAS with a reprint of the page from the book. So here are the other 2 that were in my collection. The first is a Spanish PBP that is a graded UKG 85, and then I also had this one that just came back fairly recently from Collector Archive Services. This is just a standard Hong Kong figure, and we're going to kind of compare this Hong Kong figure to the next example that I picked up, and this one is the rare example where I have upgraded a figure. This is the early Spanish Poch figure with the Hong Kong COO, and that figure is known to have pale hands and chest. And that's what this one is. I had one already in my collection that was graded CAS 70+, but I was lucky enough to find this one from the Muffin Man on eBay. And it did arrive to me, although I would recommend that he tape the box a little bit better. It arrived completely open. The whole box was open, and I was fearing the worst, but luckily, lo and behold, the figure was perfectly safe inside. But the box had literally had opened up completely during transit. But luckily it arrived safe and sound. And this is graded 80% by UKG. And you'll notice at first blush, the most telling difference between the early Spanish figure on your left and the standard Hong Kong is how pale the hands and chest are. It is also a slightly different face sculpt. But the hands and chests are very, very pale paint applications versus the standard Hong Kong figure. The other thing I'll note is that with the Spanish Poch, usually the belt buckle is not painted nearly as large as the standard Hong Kong. So if you look at how kind of small and narrow the paint apps on that belt buckle are versus the Hong Kong, where it captures all the outside of the belt buckle, that's another telling sign that this is the Spanish figure. And we'll go through the guidebook here in a second. But here's the label on it: Han Solo Poch 1977 Hong Kong COO, as all early Spanish figures are. Again, they imported the parts from Hong Kong and then painted and assembled them in Spain, but it got a straight 80s for the sub scores for an overall 80%. So I was able to upgrade my 70 plus from, or 70, I can't remember, it's either 70 or 70 plus from CAS, and was able to get this UKG 80%. And this one, you know, quite honestly, it didn't look that much different than the one that I had from CAS when I stood them side by side. So I'm still a firm believer that that one was undergraded by CAS. But one other quick note that I'll show you in the book as well, but the paints, the stripes on the pants are a much brighter, more vibrant red relative to the Hong Kong, which usually is not, maybe this one's got maybe a little bit of fading to it, but it's still, the Spanish figure is noted in the book to have a very bright red stripe versus the standard Hong Kong figures. So those are a couple of different things that you can note with these Spanish figures. Is the smaller paint apps on the belt buckle, obviously the pale hands and chest, which is what it's known for the most, and then the brighter red stripe on the pants. And on some of the figures, there is a little, what's called a melt mark, a factory defect just from the assembly process on the butt area for this Han. This one, the one I have, does not have that melt mark that I can tell. It looks to be pretty clean. But there are some examples in the book that very clearly show that. The weapon, unlike the Han Hoth, the Han Solo First 12 figure does not have a PBP specific burr on the barrel of the blaster, on the DL-44 blaster, like the Han Hoth does. But anyway, just a pretty incredible addition, and very, very happy with it. And so now I've got the Spanish PBP, the later Spanish figure, and the earlier Spanish Poch, and you can see the differences in the paint applications on the Spanish PBP. It's much more in keeping with the Hong Kong figures in terms of the paint applications on the hands and the chest, versus the Spanish Poch on your left that is very, very pale. So, but it's very nice to have both of them in very high grade now. The Spanish Poch and then the Spanish PBP. Before we dig into the last Han Solo item I picked up, let's just really quickly show you the book. And the book does a good job of showing what I've already talked about, that the belt buckle is typically painted much more narrow than the Hong Kong figure. And this does a really great job of showing you the differences in the face sculpts. It's very subtle, but you know, obviously there's some sculpting differences for the early Hong Kong pale hands. I would argue I would call it a pale hands and chest, but this has a side-by-side of the Spanish figure versus the standard Hong Kong, and very clearly shows that paint application difference. He also does show in the book the melt marks on the back of the butt, on the butt of the figure, that it was common. It wasn't on every figure, clearly, since mine doesn't have it, but these melt marks are just factory defects as part of the assembly process for these early Spanish figures. And then he also does very clearly show a side-by-side of the Spanish Poch with the brighter, more vibrant red line on the pants versus the Hong Kong figure, which is a more muted red color. And then again, there's not really any burr on the barrel for the Spanish-made blast DL-44 blaster versus the standard Hong Kong. So you can pretty much pair it up, I think, with any Hong Kong DL-44 blaster. And then here is the COO on it, a nice close-up there. It's a two-line Hong Kong. So anyway, probably more information that you wanted to know, but I thought it was worth at least sharing what's in the book, because it really is an invaluable resource for taking a look at figures, especially if they're not graded yet. If they're for sale, like on Facebook or on eBay, it's great to be able to reference these photos to make sure that what you're buying is actually a early Spanish figure. Because since they have Hong Kong COOs, these early Spanish Pochs How do you know you don't have like a degraded standard Hong Kong versus an actual Spanish figure? So looking for all of these different tells, like the melt marks, like the differences in paint color, the differences in the belt paint applications, belt buckle paint applications, you know, all that kind of stuff can help you verify that it's an actual Spanish figure versus just a degraded Hong Kong figure. And then finally, to wrap this video up, I wanted to show you the Baggie that I picked up. I was able to pick up a UKG graded Han Solo Baggie. This is the SW-B Baggie, so this is an early Han Solo Baggie, and this has the deluxe casing style from UKG that I talked about in my grading case comparison video. I love these UKG cases. I think it does a great job of elevating a simple baggie and turning it into a really nice display item. And so this was graded UKG 85%, Hong Kong SWB Baggie. The figure got an 85. The paint applications got an 85 for an overall 85. And this one just turned out really great. So I'm really happy to have another Han Solo item for the collection. It's not huge, but it's going pretty well here. And I think at some point this year, I'd like to add the small head Han Solo, just a standard Hong Kong in high grade, to kind of fill this out a little bit more. But largely, you know, I think for the larger head Hans, the only other one I'd really like to pick up is the No COO. That was made, you know, probably in the Palatoy factory or somewhere like that. But that's really the only kind of notable COO that I still don't have is that the No COO large head Han. But in terms of the small head Hans, I don't have any yet. So I know there's 2 or 3 of those. There's the molded legs, there's the painted legs, and I'm sure there's others. But anyway, that's all I really had for this video. I hope you found this information helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.